It's like half the room. Please come to the front. All right. This is actually the largest panel of this event. Yeah, in the smallest room. Yeah. I actually wanted to have this panel on the main stage, but all of my team advised against that because people think that no one's going to understand what these guys are saying. But yeah, I believe that's not going to be so, right? So here we are. I'm sorry for the room being a bit smaller than the rest of us combined. But this panel we're going to discuss, since in the advanced, well, the name is just for the namesake. We have advanced stage and beginner stage. We actually plan to change the name to both advanced stage 1 and 2, but we forgot to do that. That's why Luke was saying, why are we in the beginner stage, right? So you guys have presented your project solutions, approach to, basically Bitcoin and namely scaling Bitcoin, or how to use Bitcoin in the future, how to better use Bitcoin either through Lightning or through sidechains or alternative protocols like Arc protocol. You advocate for even more protocols than that. So for a quick recap, just like since there are 5 of you here, let's make it really quick. Can you just say really quickly what is your approach? How do you contribute to advancing Bitcoin and the use of Bitcoin? Starting with Neil.
Hi there, my name's Neil. So I'm working for a company called Second, and we're building an implementation of the Arc protocol. And the Arc protocol is a brand new layer 2. It's not out on mainnet yet, it's still in development. There's 2 teams working on it. And unlike the Lightning Network, which takes this very kind of peer-to-peer approach to building scalability for Bitcoin, Arc takes a different approach. It embraces a little bit of centralization. So it's a client-server model. You have wallets connecting directly to a server, and it scales Bitcoin that way. But it does it in a way that ensures that users retain self-custody. So unlike eCash, where you have to give up your custody, Arc ensures that you can always get back on chain yourself without asking for permission. And I think we're going to go into some more detail in a bit, but that's a high level overview.
We get back to the details a bit later. Yeah.
Hey, I'm Roland. I work on Albi. We build products, services, and open protocols around Bitcoin and Lightning. We're definitely building for the present today, and there are still a lot of issues which we could improve to make it easier to onboard new people onto Lightning and Bitcoin. So, yeah, that's me.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Luke, co-founder and CTO of Umbral. This is my co-founder and CEO, Mayank over there. We build like a home server operating system that makes it really easy to run a Bitcoin node, a Lightning node, and all of the kinds of Bitcoin services, and also other services as well related to Bitcoin. Anything you'd run on a home server, you can run on Umbral.
I'm Andreas. I'm working on Sequentia, which is a Bitcoin sidechain, which is specifically not a layer 2, because I believe that layer 2 is properly defined as a payment layer, non-custodial payment layer with unilateral exit. So I don't think that existing sidechains are layer 2s or should be trying to be layer 2s. I think that sidechains should be for settlement of other types of financial instruments other than money, whereas money should scale on layer 2s like the Lightning Network or Arc and sell on the main chain.
So I'm Seth. I'm building CRUD at the moment. Like we are a Lightning finance solution based in here in Thailand. We actually supposed to be building a synthetic asset on top of the Lightning Network, except I kept getting nerd sniped by Super Testnet. So every single time he comes up with like something new, we try to like make that a lot more approachable. Like recently, like we made a spiritual successor to StateChain.js, which is like basically an idea that I think like is very similar to what Arc is, but like I think like it's a lot less scalable, but a lot more approachable because it's built on JavaScript. So like easier approachable by the developer talent pool in Asia and communicates via the Nostra network. So least qualified.
Right. So, okay, apart from Sid and you, most of you are more involved in, well, actually we are all involved in different approach, right, to how we see that we can push Bitcoin forward. Starting with Neil, what is the main difference between, I think a lot of people want to ask this or have heard this before, but what is the main difference between ARC protocol and the approach that Lightning uses?
Okay, that's quite a big question. First of all, it's the client-server model. So there's a bit of centralization there. You're connecting to a centralized server and you're making transactions there. A key difference is that you don't need to worry, or at least the end user doesn't need to worry about liquidity or channels. So let's say you want to onboard onto the Lightning Network, you're going to need to make an on-chain payment to open a payment channel to the wider network. Whereas with ARC, I can just set up a wallet like I do on Bitcoin and immediately start receiving, we call them VTXOs, virtual UTXOs, straight away into your wallet. And so you don't need that onboarding cost. You don't need that you don't have to think about channels or liquidity, inbound, outbound, none of that. So it's a lot simpler for getting that new user on board. And there was one thing that Luke highlighted to me yesterday, which I hadn't realized, but it also allows us to scale UTXOs on chain. So on Lightning, every single person on the Lightning network needs their own UTXO to be able to interact with the wider network. But with ARC, we can actually put 1,000 people on a single UTXO. So it allows us to scale Bitcoin's UTXO set as well to a lot of users instead of just this one-to-one relationship. I think another key advantage of ARC is that you can predict liquidity costs a little bit better. So if I'm an LSP, a Lightning service provider, and I'm providing channels and liquidity to my users, it's very difficult to know how many payments they're going to be making, how many fees am I going to be generating from that channel over any length of time. Whereas with ARC, they make a payment and I can say exactly how long that's going to take to expire, so I can predict my costs of capital. So it can become a little bit more efficient in terms of capital usage as well. There's probably some other differences that I'm not thinking of off the top of my head, but that's some of the key ones to highlight.
Yeah, I want to touch on the centralization part, where it's a bit more centralized, but how much more? Is there how much do they have to worry about the counterparty risk of the server side?
The point is that there's no counterparty risk, at least for balances over a certain amount. So the VTXOs that you hold within the ARC, at any time, even if the ARC disappears and goes offline, I can broadcast that VTXO to the Bitcoin blockchain and retrieve my funds. However, if I do that in an emergency situation, it's called a unilateral exit, that transaction is huge. So it's very expensive to write to the Bitcoin blockchain. So if you have a very low balance, let's say you got $5 or $10 on ARC, it's not going to make sense for you to be able to retrieve those funds in an emergency. But if you've got $1,000, $10,000 on there, okay, now you get all the self-custodial benefits. You can you can trustlessly know that you can access those funds. So yeah, I think that answers the question.
Yeah,
and I think another key thing to highlight is we don't know how centralized ARCs will become. They might just be one or two supermassive ARCs that everybody connects to and transacts on there. Or it might be that you have ARCs specializing in certain use cases and we end up with 1,000 ARCs and people pick and choose which ones they want to use. But the ARC protocol is completely open source, so anybody can set up their ARC and try and generate users. And also ARCs can be interoperable, so you can make transactions between ARCs over the Lightning network. So people can maintain ARC balances on multiple different ARCs and transact between them over Lightning. While it does embrace some centralization, there's a lot of opportunity for decentralization there as well.
Mm-hmm. I just realized that we might need a Fedi guy here too. But yeah.
And just to add to that, so you mentioned about how centralized is it? Mm-hmm. Often we think of centralization as a bad thing, because often if something's centralized, it takes away the properties that we want. You lose censorship resistance, or you need permission, or you lose privacy. But the really interesting thing about Ark's design is it actually uses centralization as a benefit. It's one of like the few centralized systems where it still has like very high amounts of censorship resistance. It still has extremely good privacy, and it uses the centralization as a benefit to centralize all of the sort of like liquidity issues with Lightning and management issues to like one service provider that can then solve those problems in a very efficient way, and then everybody gets the benefit of that and just pays them for it without having to trust them or lose privacy to them or anything like that. So it's like we often think of centralization as a bad thing, but in the context of Arc, it's actually almost like a positive thing.
Mm-hmm. So you still get full control of your keys of the VTXOs. Yeah.
I just want to go like a one step further than that, which is like every time I go and talk to like people who are like, hey, like decentralization is on a spectrum. Like a lot of times, like I just kind of approach them with like, I'm actually a centralization maximalist because like my private key only centralizes a lot of my decision, right? So when people actually try to like compare Lightning Network with like or Arc or state chain, is it okay to classify Arc as a state chain too? By the way, I'm not sure if that's like the.
So the Arc core payments are state chain like, but the rest is not. But I'm probably not technically proficient enough to make a good comparison there.
I think like when we approach this issue, this problem, like I try to just like steer the conversation towards like censorship resistance because like decentralization is like the true two words like censorship resistant, right? Because like everybody is like having their centralized private key that is protected by proof of work because everyone else is protected private key as well. I think like that's the best way I kind of approach this problem. So like when I listen to like basically like the debate about like decentralization or whatnot, it's like we'll get there.
Anyone want to add to that? Right? No? Moving on, just like we might get back to that from other comparisons. I want to go on to Lightning, right? So we have another approach. Everyone's familiar with Lightning. We have used Lightning all the time. Roland, you run a Lightning service, right? I'm not calling it a Lightning wallet anymore. It's like a super app now, right? So the thing with Lightning is that on the surface, right, we promote both decentralization and trustlessness, right? We have channels open to each other and that connects into a network. But in the real world, what really happens is we see, even in the floor, right? Everywhere you look, everywhere you go, people are using wallet of Satoshis. People are using, some people are using, I don't know, Blink or maybe something like that. So in a sense, that's even more centralized in a bad way, right? It's not centralized where you still get control. You don't even have control. It's custodial service. Albi used to be like that, but I see you've been developing and trying to change that. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I remember we had a chat last year and you said Albi is like one of our big banks, right? And like that doesn't really go along with what we're trying to do with Bitcoin, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone should have self-custody and should be free to transact with whoever they want. The thing is, we have quite a few self-custodial wallets, but most of them are just standard wallets where you scan an invoice and pay it. But if we see where things are going, Lightning is going to be embedded into everything you use, all your applications, all your interactions with people, and having such a user interface where you have to switch to your other app to make a payment, it is not seamless. So Albi is kind of taking a different approach. So not just that, but because of the regulation in the US, and also because we've always wanted people to run self-custody, right? To have their own keys, their own coins. We've completely switched our model, and this has been actually made possible by open protocols like Nostra Wallet Connect, which allow you to seamlessly interact from your wallet to any sort of application over Nostra relays. And this allows you to use your wallet on any device, from a mobile app or to a backend server, a desktop app, games, any sort of application. So now we're actually running self-custodial nodes, and these can be run on Umbrel or Start9 or even in the cloud. It doesn't matter. You choose what works for you. And you have this experience where you can connect to different wallets, which before was custodial. Same with so there's Albi and also ZBD have these APIs and Blink. But for example, if one of these services gets shut down, right, then you have to go to Blink, for example, or you get shut down, you go to ZBD, you need to use a completely different API. But now we have these open protocols that you can use instead, which are built on top of Lightning. It's actually another layer. So you have on-chain Bitcoin and then Lightning, and now it's kind of like the application layer. How do applications interact with wallets? And kind of this abstracts away the difference between the different Lightning node implementations. So you don't have to use the Lightning node APIs like LND or Eclair or Core Lightning directly, but you use a simple protocol which is super easy for developers to create their applications. So they can more focus on building these nice applications and spending less time trying to integrate with Lightning wallets. So now from going from just a few nodes run by Albi, now we're getting our Albi user base all running their own nodes basically, or connecting to an existing node on Umbrel or Start9 because our product is so much easier to use. With one click, you get a channel, migrate all your funds to your node, and you're basically up and running with no downsides. So we're really excited with how things are going and what's possible now in the future.
Yeah, I've been following that really closely. It's been, I see really cool projects coming from being able to do it non-custodially. Andy, what about you?
Yeah, well, actually, on the topic of custodial Lightning wallets, I think that obviously they're not ideal, but part of and this is more of a socioeconomic argument than a technical one, but part of the reason why we see so much usage of these wallets is because the Lightning network is in a really good place right now. I think adoption of Lightning has reached critical mass. People increasingly want to and need to interact with the Lightning network, and obviously there are growing pains, and that's why we see so much usage of custodial wallets. But it also, I think, should direct our efforts in terms of development, because if anything is going to come along that's better than Lightning or can replace Lightning, it has to somehow deal with the fact that Lightning already has so much momentum, so much merchant adoption, so much so many developers excited about it, and therefore the only way that something could overlap with its use case and be used the way that Lightning is used today and take some of its network effects is if it's perfectly backwards interoperable the way that Arc is.
Mm-hmm. So network effect is really important.
Right.
Yeah, and what about why do you choose to explore the sidechains approach? I mean, that's not for scaling; that's for
right, for asset tokenization. So I believe that Bitcoin block space, any alternative use of Bitcoin block space needs to compete with the main use of Bitcoin block space, which is settling purely monetary transactions. So I think that that's a valid justification for using a sidechain to have a separate block space that has a different use case. Namely settlement of assets other than money, and the issue with existing sidechains is that they also intentionally or not overlap with the use case of L2s, with the use case of Lightning, which is transferring money, but they're not able to leverage Lightning's network effects like I described.
How's that different from other protocols that aims to do tokenization on different approach, say maybe like Allen assets and stuff like that?
Well, Taproot assets or RGB are much more efficient in how they use Bitcoin block space than previous models, previous approaches, or even contemporary ones like Runes or BRC20s. But even still, they still rely on committing data on chain. And so you're still going to need to write inside Bitcoin transactions, at least for issuing new assets, for opening and Lightning channels and managing liquidity. And there's also always going to be some assets that don't have enough liquidity to justify using over Lightning. And in that case, in those cases, you're going to end up using Bitcoin block space in competition with monetary Bitcoin transactions.
Okay, Sid, do you have anything to add to that?
I think like basically
In terms of tokenization.
as tokenization is like one of those like I think that I think has the most amount like basically like money investment into like I would say like it's to us like at Crude like we try our best to actually like kind of like stay away from the tokenization because like we actually believe that like the idea of like Bitcoin being the monetary asset actually is like much more longer lasting. So like we actually talk about the idea of like synthetic asset that actually is like pegged to Bitcoin, which can actually be done on like the DCA level, right? On the DLC level. So for us, like I think like we stay away from like the tokenization like market as much as possible because like it. I think that I kind of agree with you that like basically we need to keep Bitcoin block space for the monetary value and whatnot. And also like committing like basically like state chain and like an ARC state on top of like Bitcoin. So like if I were to borrow the terminology of like the Web3 ecosystem, they would say like we're gonna use Bitcoin as the data availability layer. It's just that like tokenization at the moment, like it seems to me that like we're reintroducing lower cost of capital on top of Bitcoin, which means that like we're allowing a lot of people to actually also mint useless token on top of Bitcoin as well. So like for me, like it's always like a back and forth with me. Like hey, like if the market demands it, like that might have a lifespan on top of Bitcoin, but like every single asset that is going to be minted on top of Bitcoin is going to have to compete with Bitcoin, right? Like directly compete with Bitcoin. So we'll kind of have to like see how the market pans out. That's just how I look at it.
Right. So going back to Luke, right? I'm bro. Like so, we see all these different approaches, and at the end of the day, people to be able to use it, it has to be easier to use. It has to be easy to apply. Do you think Umbro has a role to play in this?
Yeah, I mean, we've tried to make it as easy as possible to run a Lightning node. Albi Hub, which Albi are working on, is like a massive improvement in terms of like actually long-term managing the node. I think it's always going to be good that people can run their own Lightning node and it's easy as possible. But I think the way that the Lightning network is moving is more around like, it's going to be like a niche of people running their own node, and it's going to be more like a service provider's job to actually run a node. You were talking before about like other scaling solutions competing with Lightning and like Lightning having the network effect. I'm not sure it's the right way to think about it. It's like other scaling solutions are competing with Lightning. I think it's kind of like a stack where like Bitcoin solved trustless value transfer. We didn't have a way to trustlessly move value before Bitcoin, and now we do. Lightning solved instant settlement. We didn't have a way to instantly move around Bitcoin, and now we do. And then the next problem to solve is like scaling the UTXO set. There's 8 billion people on the planet. We can't have 8 billion UTXOs. So we need a way to scale that. And Bitcoin and Lightning, they already have their job that they're solving, and then this is the next thing. So I think like the scaling solutions moving forwards are going to be competing over like who can solve this problem of scaling the UTXO set. ARC seems like a really impressive way of doing it. Fedimint is another way of doing it, and eCash in general is another way of doing it that has different sets of trade-offs. So I think it's less about like Lightning as a scaling solution competing with other scaling solutions. It's like Lightning has solved instant settlement, and the other scaling solutions are trying to scale the UTXO set to everybody.
Yeah. So and they also work together, right? Interoperable.
Yeah.
So you can have like Lightning running on VTXO. Is that possible?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so like.
I mean, not now.
Not now. No, right?
Maybe in the future.
And the great thing about Lightning is because you can do trustless instant settlement, it's the perfect interoperability layer between all the scaling solutions. So if somebody is like an ARC service provider and they're building their solution, and then somebody else has some totally other scaling solution that's not anything to do with ARC, as long as these two systems can talk Lightning, all the users inside the ARC and all the users inside the other scaling solution can all pay each other via Lightning, and there's no need for these service providers to have any trust between each other in any way. So they can build and be interoperable with everyone without needing to trust all these different companies, entities that you don't know who they are.
Changing the topic a bit.
Sorry, can I just quickly add something to that? I think they're not necessarily competing as in like which one will win in the end. So certainly like we're moving towards a blend of scaling solutions, but I think it's it's unfair to say that they're not competing because they are competing for certain categories of users, certain individual users. Like at any point in time, there's only so many Bitcoin users, and the various different scaling solutions are competing over those users.
So
And like,
the use case of buying coffee specifically, for example.
right. Yes. Like making a retail transaction, maybe one scaling solution is better than the other. So yeah, just highlighting that.
I want to add on top of like basically Luke's emphasization of like how we don't actually look at like Lightning as just like a second layer. We look at it as a settlement layer as well because like at the moment like with all the competing solution, I want to add like BitVM and BitVM2 as well, right? Like, and also if you want to go a bit further on the EVM, well, it's also rootstock, right? But basically like all of those like ecosystem, all of those like solutions actually have a problem of like what if one day they're kind of stuck on the wrong chain? Like like when you look at the network propagation of the Bitcoin network, right? There are chances where you actually have like a split ends, right? So at the moment, like in terms of like settlement, like we kind of see Lightning succeeding at like Bitcoin succeed in like in the double spend solution, and like Lightning succeed in the instant settlement solution, and like we don't actually know yet. To me, like it's not just the client side model with ASP yet. Like I don't see at the moment. I don't see how Arc is allowing people to kind of like, hey, like after I see a settlement complete on Arc, do I not have to double check on Bitcoin? Because like at the moment we have that on Lightning now, right? Because like if Arc finalize the settlement on the Arc server side, but like Arc has steered away from the Bitcoin chain, I don't know how. Like it can happen, right? I'm just gonna say this. Like
it's like a really rare thing. Yeah, because it's most likely it's going to be settled on both.
Yeah. So unless like you actually have the same settlement time with like Bitcoin, like I that's kind of like where maybe I should look more into it as well.
Yeah,
but like
so the point is that even before that's settled on chain, like let's say you're doing an Arc payment, you can still broadcast that VTXO and reclaim your funds as long as the Arc and the sender don't collaborate. So as long as one of those entities is honest, you will be able to retrieve those funds.
And that's because like the retrieval is like a burden on the user a little bit, right? Because like they can unilateral exit if like basically the Arc has like shifted away from the Bitcoin chain. Again, it can happen like accidentally, right? We can actually have like two blocks emerging at the same time. Like I'm not trying to say like there is like a malicious player in this like situation here. It's just like when you look at like Bitcoin scaling on a layer 2 scaling, why I keep gravitating back to like Lightning is because it's proven to kind of like work like that. Like basically the settlement on Lightning, obviously like it would be better like if we also like confirm like Lightning transaction on Bitcoin again, but like in terms of like sharing UTXO or like trading liquidity on the Lightning network, like it's people don't double check Lightning settlement with like Bitcoin settlement because that's not the model. Like all the solution I've seen at the moment, Arc and like Mercury layer 2, right? Like it's very hard. It's very hard to explain to the layman user.
Okay, I think I'm gonna have to talk to you after the talk to understand that better. But like Lightning is certainly more proven right now, but like Arc has literally only been around for like it was conceived 1 year ago, and it was only the code's only been around for like 6 months or something. So like it's not on mainnet yet. Like we kind of got to give it a chance, right?
Yes.
Just Piriya, before you asked about Umbrella, I'd like to add.
Go on. I'm just pretending to understand what you guys are saying, man.
Well, we talked about trustlessness, right? And I think the custodial nature that we have now with a few really large custodians is full with trust, right? So, and when Satoshi created Bitcoin, he made the code open source so that you don't have to trust Satoshi even, right? So I think being able to run the software, check it out locally or run it on Umbrella is like, it's reducing the amount of trust that you need, right? And if you can still have a really easy experience, like a normal everyday person who just wants to send Lightning transactions but wants to do it in a self-sovereign way, they can install something like Umbrella really simply. I think this is like massive for Bitcoin and Lightning.
Well, my next question is for Umbro actually. Ever since, like you're having two mics offer. Ever since we have Umbro, I think running a node has never been easier. We have other implementations. We have Start9, we have Citadel coming up. That's also easy. But before that, it was well, running a Bitcoin node is easy, but to do something with a Bitcoin node is not really easy. Then we have Umbrel with the app stores and everything, and people can play around. Do you have, I don't really have the numbers, but I suspect that most, if not like 80-70% of the new Bitcoin nodes spinning up because of Umbrel. So do you think that would play into giving you an outsized influence on the selection of Bitcoin implementations and directions of whether to go for ARC or Lightning, something like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one thing we do on Umbrel is we never auto update apps. So for example, we couldn't force push out an update to Bitcoin Core or LND, the Lightning Network implementation, that we wanted to push on people. So the way that it's built is you can only opt into updates. We also support the Lightning Node app and the Core Lightning app on the App Store. So you can choose which Lightning implementation. We offer our own official Lightning app, which uses LND internally. But Blockstream have their own Core Lightning app, so that's their own app that they manage. And we want to have more Lightning implementations on the App Store. Albi Hub, which is about to release on the App Store, embeds Phoenix D, which is a new Lightning implementation as well. So then we'll have 3 implementations on the App Store.
And LDK too. So yeah.
And LDK. So there'll be 4 soon on 4 different Lightning implementations that you can run on Umbrel, of which Umbrel the company only works on one of those. Also Bitcoin Core. So we have the official Umbrel app, which uses Bitcoin Core, but we also have Bitcoin Knots, which is an alternative Bitcoin Core implementation. So you can run multiple implementations. Currently, it's kind of most of the apps only work with the Bitcoin Core app, but we're working on a solution to that where the way we want it to work is you'll be able to choose which Bitcoin Core app backs. So we put a lot of thought into kind of making sure that we don't have this control over the App Store. Also, we have third-party community app stores. So even if let's say we didn't allow an app into the official Umbrel App Store that people wanted to run, it's possible for somebody to create their own community app store, which Umbrel the company has absolutely zero control over, and somebody else can manage that app store. You can add it as a source and install all these apps, and there's no way that we can sort of limit that. So for example, if we were anti-ARC and didn't want to ship an ARC app, any ARC company can create their own community app store, which is what you guys have done with the Albi Hub app so far.
I think as soon as you guys started pushing any contentious application or something, that it would kill your audience, kill your customer base, overnight.
That too.
Yeah, it's a bit like an ARC, a misbehaving ARC would lose all of their users immediately, and I think something similar for Umbrella. You kind of have to stay open. To some extent, Apple do as well. Their app store, they certainly do curate that, but if they push it too far, everybody just jumps ship to Android. So, yeah.
But then they have the sunk cost of you bought an iPhone, you can't really go anywhere. But in this case, right? So you have a machine, you can install anything.
Yep, yeah. That's right. And you can also actually not all the apps, but 99% of the apps on the App Store are open source. All of the Umbrel apps are open source. So if you didn't want to just click update, you can actually download the source code for the apps, read it, make sure it's doing what you think it's doing, and compile it yourself. There's no actual need to trust us as a company. It's just we have one-click solutions. It's a convenience.
So the next one is an open question. What do you think are the main challenges of driving forward solutions to whatever problems Bitcoin have? I want to say scaling, but sometimes I think there's more problems than that. We have privacy, we have scalings, right? We have Lightning, we have ARC protocol, we have sidechains. Yeah. What do you think would be the main challenges going forward?
I think some of the most promising scaling solutions are moving to a slightly more centralized model. So for example, ARC and eCash both rely on a service provider to work. And I think there's going to be a lot of regulatory issues. It's not exactly clear whether it's legal or not to be one of these service providers, or where you can do that, or what exactly you are or aren't allowed to do. It used to seem if you weren't custodying users' funds, if you were just cryptographically moving funds around without ever having ownership of them, that was okay. But it seems now there's some court cases with Samurai Wallet where even that's not okay. So I think the biggest issues would be regulatory.
So we've reached that point. I mean, I was just talking. Actually, we should have Dia on this panel, because I was just talking to her about Fedi, and in Thailand that would fall in to be eligible to apply for a custodial license. Right? So a federation, because you hold some of the keys, that classify you as a custody. And that will probably be the same for ARC, and you start running into regulations problems.
So just to throw out a little bit for the answers about when you talk about Fedi or Cashew as a solution, we're talking about Xiaomi eCash as
Cashew has to actually pull out from Thailand, right?
Which one?
The one at Bob.
Which that one, yeah.
Yeah.
The main thing is that we don't talk about Aekasitt.
Let's not talk about people who's not here.
Yeah. Basically, I think that when you talk about Xiaomi eCash, we talk about semi-custodial solution. So at the moment, we actually have on stage collaborative UTXO, which is ARC is a collaborative UTXO thing, right? And Lightning is more hey, we're just gonna scale liquidity and what first. So I think everybody has a different approach to this, but definitely I think there is no getting away from the custodial, I would say tag when we talk about Xiaomi eCash. So that introduces a lot of jurisdictional problem for the service provider. I think ARC and other solutions are trying to basically steer as clear away as possible from having the custodial blend.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think one of the challenges present time is there's a lot of money and energy being burnt on building bare Bitcoin bridges or more trust minimized Bitcoin bridges. I think that's ignoring the fact that people don't actually really want a more trust minimized Bitcoin bridge. Actually, the biggest Bitcoin derivatives today are the most centralized ones. WBTC has hundreds of times more than value locked than LBTC and RBTC combined. And so I think that again, the Lightning networks, network effects have reached critical mass. That's something that we need to be focusing on. See, Lightning today doesn't scale to 8 billion people. I think that it does with channel factories. That's the approach I'm most bullish about personally. But I think that there should also be work on solutions like ARC, which can leverage Lightning's existing network effects, and that's where the scaling effort should focus.
There's actually been comments online about how we didn't cover other innovations in the space. That actually goes, against what we're talking about here, is that how to use more space on the Bitcoin blockchains, like Opcats, not Opcat, like ordinals and stuff like that. Do you think those line of technology can be vertically integrated into some of these protocols? Or maybe we're not familiar with it enough.
So I don't understand the question. I think, can you?
Yeah. So basically Ordinal is just they want to use Bitcoin block space, but more so on the witness data to actually do extra monetary scaling on top of Bitcoin, which means that a lot of the data that basically state chain does have to stamp on top of Bitcoin. They want to do that for every random thing. So that's the distinction, I think.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, that's where I would say that people should be thinking about sidechains for anything that's not purely monetary. You shouldn't be using Bitcoin block space for that.
Yeah, I agree. Right. So back to the regulatory barriers. How do you think it's going to play out? I mean, when we talk about Bitcoin, one of the things I notice is that as time goes by, the game theories always play out. But on this side, how do you think that's going to play out in your mind in the next, say, 5 to 10 years? Or maybe 10 years too long, and 2 years in Bitcoin is like an eternity. So maybe the next 2 to 5 years.
Well, I think we're going to see the effects of regulatory competition a lot more. I think that jurisdictions like El Salvador are going to, pull more than their weight in terms of global influence and being treated as a sandbox. I think we're already seeing that. I think that in part digital asset laws like El Salvador has passed are also going to help with that. New asset classes, you might disagree, but like MicroStrategy, financial instruments that become vehicles for Bitcoin accumulation are also going to be extremely important. Cutting-edge jurisdictions like El Salvador are going to be pioneers in that front.
Anyone else? Yeah.
Yeah. I think anything that tries to attack Bitcoin just makes it stronger. I think recently, especially like the custodial stuff, people use it, it's easy, and now the custodial services are slowly having to stop operating in certain jurisdictions. But that is actually pushing self-custody, right? This is making people take responsibility for their own keys and their own money. And we are developing scaling solutions that improve on this to make self-custody as easy as possible as custody was. And of course, there are some downsides, right? You have to pay to open channels. And again, yeah, maybe Arc is a solution for this in the future, right? For now, we are exploring some solutions where you can run your own node and share your liquidity with your friends and family, basically running that Uncle Jim model, which I think it's not perfect, but it's something that works right now and is quite interesting to explore. So we're going to see if people who run these nodes, are they happy to take responsibility for their friends and family, or is it not going to work? I think it's a cool experiment to see what happens in the next couple of years.
Neil?
So I work in the Bitcoin industry, so I think you just have to take an optimistic view on regulations. So I hope that self-custody will protect businesses, but I think we just have to keep an eye on the situation, and it could go completely the other way. The Samurai case is going to set a few precedents, at least in the US. Like jurisdictional competition is good, definitely, but if you have users in other countries, or you plan to have users in other countries from that jurisdiction, like you still have to abide by the regulations in that jurisdiction, technically. So like if you just plan to service the El Salvador country, and they have some very flexible regulations, then fine, but that's quite a small market. Like I think most of us are, especially if we're running a startup, we're looking for like a global user base. So just sometimes I do worry. So we just have to kind of keep an eye on it. And I think it's really important that any Bitcoin business that is building tries to keep things open source that allows like kind of plan Bs to come into action if things go south.
Right. Anyone else? Yeah?
Come back with a subpoena. That's
What?
basically like if they want to come and knock on our door, I feel like a lot of times it's like people are like, and we in Thailand, right? Like we deal with the regulators in Thailand, and a lot of times it's a lot more, but like playing with words and like actually like making sure like you're too scared to actually do anything. So a lot of times that we have to kind of respond to, I would say like local jurisdiction. It's that like what we're doing something that doesn't touch your jurisdictional money. You would definitely have to come back with a subpoena if you want to go kind of further with like any discussion. I think like that's the kind of like attitude we kind of give to whoever comes asking.
A funny story. I was just talking with the SEC yesterday. You're still asking about, does this thing called FEDI, what is it? Does it fall into the custodial license? Do they have to apply for that? Do they have to shut down the workshop? Right? So, what is it? How do I explain it? So,
You're not the best person playing dumb, so.
I mean the officers who is she's friendly to Bitcoin, all right. But if it's custodial, we need to regulate it. So I just told her that it's a protocol that enables anyone to become a custodian without telling you. Right. So I mean that's the state of things. As technology moves faster than regulations, and we're always going to be fighting regulations one way or another, right? And we just hope that the government would choose to embrace the right thing. Right. So we have a few minutes for questions.
I want to throw some metrics about like basically the network effect we're talking about as well with like a layer 2 solution or at least like scaling solution as well, because a lot of times that like we have a lot of, including the SEC, the regulators as well, they are a lot more focused on the fundraising apparatus of like crypto a lot more than they are in Bitcoin, and that's great, by the way. Like keep focusing on them because there's a lot of like debauchery going on there. What I want to talk about here is that as well is like people don't actually know this, but like there are more Lightning nodes, or there are more like basically people using Lightning as an Uncle Jim model, and also like Freddy and Cashew nowadays as well. Then there are Ethereum nodes, like and they say that like there are like 400,000 like Ethereum validators, but when you actually re-look into
it runs on 3 computers.
It's a fake KPI, like basically. Just like a lot of things in the crypto world, like that's a fake KPI because when you look at the Ethereum node that's actually running top of chain, like the one that actually is like like having the most updated information, there are less than 5,000. So like a lot of times here, like when you look at this, like you are gonna have to like battle with a lot of like misinformation as well. I think that like the reason we come back to like Fedi a lot is because like Lightning as a network effect has proven to work. It has proven to be answering the right peer-to-peer economy. Fedi and Cashew is trying to like make that a lot more possibly deniable. Like add a lot more like possible deniability on top of that. So when it comes down to it, like I think that like at least in the Bitcoin ecosystem, like we see people actually demanding Uncle Jim. So like just keep doing what you do.
Yeah. And we'll see Uncle Jim arrested, right?
Not that Jim, right?
Not that Jim, not your Jim.
There's another thing that I think is really important to highlight. Like, don't go the samurai route. If you're going to offer privacy solutions or any kind of Bitcoin solution, make it as friendly as possible, welcoming graphics, bright colors. Like, we have to normalize all of this stuff. So, like Samurai, it was like hoodies up, screw the government, all of that kind of language, branding. This is Bitcoin is for the streets. Like that is not going to do the industry or the users any favors at all.
Do you think that has anything to do with it, though?
That's definitely, I mean,
really?
Like, it makes them low-hanging fruit, and then you can use them to set a precedent to go for the higher-hanging fruit. It's definitely a problem, in my opinion. So I think
it's like seeing the Monero bros like wearing like a Monero T-shirt. And it's like, oh yeah, like we're gonna like see his like internet history first.
Yeah, and like I made this example yesterday, but if you look at Apple. And they make privacy solutions like end-to-end encryption and stuff like that, just super normal. It's just something that they mention in one of their presentations. It's in some like nice bright colors, some lovely fonts and stuff. And that's, I think, the approach that the whole industry needs to take.
So it's like the key takeaway is that to not overestimate the ability to understand what's really the thing. Right, for the government, as in just use bright colors and cheerful pictures.
they take intentions into account as well. Like it's like part of the case that they make against these.
Well, they have 8-bit graphics. That's cute.
Well, my intentions were Bitcoin was for the streets, for drugs, and for money launderers and stuff. Like, okay.
That's not gonna fly.
Yeah, exactly.
Specifically with the Samurai case, so their like main competitor is Wasabi, who was doing significantly more volume than them. So if like the government wanted to go after like the largest CoinJoin coordinator, they would not have gone
over
after Samurai
instead, right?
But Wasabi was never talking about money laundering or criminals or anything like that. So I think the language they were using and the way they were communicating was like the main reason that they were made an example of, not what they were doing.
Yeah. All right. Right. So we still have a few. Sorry, my watch is dead after 2 days. Right. We still have a few minutes. I think we have 1 minute, right? So any quick questions? We can actually go over a bit. Yeah. This is the last question session.
It's not a quick question.
We have time. We have time. This is the last session of the room. Yeah.
All right, so I've been thinking about like how to articulate this, and it's just going to be long-winded, so forgive me in advance. But I really want to believe in this Bitcoin to Lightning to Arc, and because as a kind of background, I have a lot of people that are super black-pilled on Lightning. Samurai would actually be a good example. As everybody knows, fuck Lightning. Lightning's dead end, dead end, dead end. I know a lot of people, smart people from the big block community, they're all like Lightning's a dead end. So this idea that ARC could actually change that is extremely exciting to me, because this idea of freedom plus small block Bitcoin feels, almost like, utopian. So I want to be able to debate with them, and I'm still struggling a lot with it. Again, I feel like I'll reach a point, I'll be like, oh, Luke, hey, Luke, like, what was the thing? And the way that I understand things is by analogy. And so I'm going to throw out an analogy. I hope it's a bad analogy, and that one of you or all of you can come up with a better analogy to kind of help me cement the conceptual understanding of this. So let's say Bitcoin to Lightning to ARC, right? HTTP to WebRTC to WebTorrent. And then a particular ARC service provider is like a WebTorrent client. That's the best I could come up with. But I hope I think it's, imperfect at best. But what I'm hoping is someone can come up with something that's better than that. Yeah, please.
So just for the Lightning Network, you said a lot of people were black-pilled. And it's super early technology, right? And a couple years ago, a lot of, the payment failure rate was high. People were getting channels shut down, all this stuff. And a great analogy here is that it's like you're in 1929. We just switched from horse riding to cars. And the cars were really shit back then, but people understood what's possible, right? So maybe your car broke down every week, but you were still like, you're pushing it because you can see the potential of what the car brings compared to what you are doing on a horse, right? So the same thing here, Lightning still has issues, and it's being actively developed on. It's going to take years, but the fundamentals are great. It's getting better every day. Payment success rate is going up, and it is going to be a great foundation. I can't say for ARC, but I think it's another step, right? It's a scaling solution built for Lightning that is going to be increasingly more needed in the future as we onboard more people onto Bitcoin and Lightning.
Let me just add that when I say black-pilled, I don't mean Lightning as a concept, but Lightning as like the final solution. And I think Luke has spoken to this very well. Like the challenges of Lightning is like the be-all, end-all.
Yeah, so in terms for a specific analogy, like I can't think of one right now. Also, ARC is still very new and also changing. So the last time I read about ARC, a lot of stuff has changed since then, and things are still changing now. But one other way of describing it is that Lightning has inherent issues with the way that it's designed. There's just massive complexities in like liquidity and running a node and managing it, that if you're expecting everybody to run a Lightning node, all of these complexities get pushed onto the end users. But with ARC, it's the same issues are still there, but all of these complexities are moved to a service provider who can then deal with those in a much better way, and the end users don't have to deal with it. So I would say, like, in a nutshell, that's kind of like how ARC solves the problems with Lightning. But I can't think of a specific...
Yeah, sure, that part I understand, just for what it's worth. You've gotten me to that point.
Cool.
So I don't have a smart answer, but just want to basically kind of like tell a story. Like basically, like I go to the big block community here. They actually have like a meetup community here in Thailand, and like basically they want to put down a sign and say Bitcoin Cash accepted here. Yeah, that big block community, and
Do you have that in Thailand?
I
don't want to know.
Yeah, okay. Basically, right, like the people who are black-pilled about like Lightning, especially like Lightning liquidity management, right? They actually have a handshake agreement with some restaurant here in Thailand that basically like, hey, like when we put down the signs that say Bitcoin Cash accepted here, and the waitress comes and get your bill, right? Like, hey, you pay in Bitcoin Cash. She would look over to the guy who she knows gonna have to like basically give her real money, like real baht, and because like she's gonna like liquidity managed without him. Those are the guys who are black-pilled about like Lightning liquidity. So I just feel like when we talk about like big blockers, like there are people who are, a lot of them are really trying to like fit like square pegs into like round holes because like they just think that like scalability only means big blocks or faster block time and all this stuff. Like I think that like Lightning solves a very specific problem of like, hey, if people do want to actually have like a peer-to-peer trade with like a lot of microtransactions, Lightning is the right solution for that. And Bitcoin, like you said before, like with HTTP and internet, like internet infrastructure, right? Bitcoin doesn't intrude, right? Bitcoin doesn't introduce a new virtual machine, right? Like Bitcoin works with the current stack, and like Nostr also works with the current stack as well. Lightning works with the current stack. Like I think like this is like a very something that like I don't have a smart answer, but I just want to tell you a story.
Yeah, just to, I feel like I should have, I didn't explain well. And I think just as a final thing, the black pilling is about the KYC component that Lightning is going to, it's the globalists, it's their end run around the decentralization, and they're gonna effectively, as it scales, it's gonna lead into a dead end where everyone KYCs. Just that, I'm not even asking for a response to that, but just to be clear, it's not the technical aspect of its abilities, but that the logical conclusion of it is universal KYC.
So basically, I want to answer before Luke answers, right? Because like he's gonna give a way better answer than I could. I think I kind of agree with you. Like the tall grass gets trimmed first, right? Like basically, like when you get big enough, they're gonna be like, hey, like now you have to KYC all your customers. So just want to give out to everyone, like run your own nodes, like run your own Lightning nodes. Like it is much easier than you think it is. Like basically, everybody here in this room can learn how to run your own Lightning node in like 5 minutes with Umbro.
And so just to address the KYC thing, so I know I've spoken to you about this before, but I'll just say
Next up, Umbro requiring KYC next year.
So like this is a valid concern. There's something could if everybody's relying on Lightning service providers, they could require KYC. But the important part is that like Lightning is a permissionless protocol, and anybody can join. So we could have these like service providers that like 90% of people are using that require KYC, but as long as these users that are KYC'd can pay any Lightning invoice, I as an individual can always run my own Lightning node in a self-sovereign way that doesn't require KYC, and I remain interoperable with all the people who are running on KYC'd nodes. So even if there is like some amount of capture, as long as the network itself remains like a permissionless network, you can still interact with the KYC portions without being KYC'd yourself, and that's a very important part.
If I might add to that, sorry. In thinking that Lightning is going to be the end all be all solution to Bitcoin as a payment network, I think I really don't see it that way, right? I will get back to you. But like, just to give a quick answer, when Bitcoin came out, people say that you can't use it as a payment network, but it works fine for a minute. And I also see that it can't scale to the global level, but to a certain extent, I don't really care because that technology is gonna improve. People are gonna work on solutions. I was there when you need to know the IP address of the file that you're gonna access on the internet and go onto something like CompuServe or AOL to get it, right? So I know back then that this is not the internet that everyone's gonna be using. This is not gonna be the answer, but it's cool anyway, and this is gonna be the start of something. So when I look at these things, right? Even Lightning, you can't scale Lightning to the global level because there's not enough UTXOs. Then comes Arc, and now we have the possibility of using VTXOs. That might not even be the solution, but we are still working on it. Technologies are evolving all the time, so I place my faith more on the people working on it with good intentions and with honesty and integrity. Yeah, sorry.
Why is it that not one of you has mentioned Varus? Do you know what that is? Varus is in many ways what you're asking for. It's interoperable, and it would allow us to do this next piece of the transaction. It allows you to use a CPU, an old phone, as a node. It's fully decentralized, and it can work with any of so it can use Bitcoin, it can transact any of these, and the self-sovereign identity happens, it's a smart contract at the transaction layer. I'm not going to like derail it, but it's just surprising to me that no one ever mentions this. And I feel like that's the answer, and it works with Bitcoin is one of the pieces it works with, and it scales. It's verus.io.
Is this an altcoin?
This has been around for like 5 years. It's like, so we have Monero, but this Verus is privacy by choice, not default. And it's all of the things that you're talking about. So it's surprising to me that like nobody's... Is it an altcoin?
It's not Bitcoin, right? It's like an alternative.
It's
crypto.
not Bitcoin. It uses Bitcoin. It can use everything.
But is it like a token? It's not Bitcoin?
It's completely decentralized. They set it up. They set it up the exact same way Bitcoin is set up, so that nobody owns it.
Sounds like it has a token. Does it?
It has a Verus. It has a Verus coin that does transact. Yes, but go look into exactly how it. But just because there's a token and a coin doesn't mean that it's not set up exactly the way Bitcoin is meant to be. That it's completely. Okay, but go.
We're discussing scaling solutions for Bitcoin, so that's
You
why
need
we didn't
to
mention
look
it.
into what that is, though, to understand how it actually is set up the way Bitcoin is.
Yeah, yeah. And in the back, Dr. Kushbu? Yeah. We might not be the one to answer that question, sorry. Yeah.
Like, I want to ask, like, Stripe, which is like 100 subsidiaries or 100 entities in one company, which follows all the compliance of the jurisdiction they operate in. What happens if Bitcoin follows the same route, all the jurisdictions of the countries? The advantage of the borderless money gets lost. So what do you think could be the solution?
Are you talking about like an inflation issues?
No, not inflation. Like, for example, if you have to do a borderless payment, then you have to comply with the regulation that you're operating, which country you're operating in. Then the advantage of borderless money that gets lost. So what do you think?
So basically, like Stripe is like a KYC Lightning service provider, right? Like basically, like like you're asking like, what if one day they say that like, hey,
Sorry, Stripe or Strike?
Stripe.
PE,
PE.
Oh, with PE. Yeah.
not strike.
That's Strike. Okay.
So that's a different one.
Yeah. So basically, I think that like we have Lightning solutions for that as well, like with KYC and without KYC. But like I think that like at the end of the day, like we look at like borderless payment, especially with like instant final settlement as well. Final being asterisk because like again, if it's on layer 2, essentially like it's built into the protocol. Like basically that like you don't even know the end of the protocol. Like is like like is that in a new country? Is that like this and that? Because like if you operate with like one single denomination, which is like Bitcoin, and you actually have like a Lightning invoice or like whatever, that is built into the protocol that like like it remains the borderless part built in, right? So like I think that like Stripe themselves actually have like a big competition going on. Like if they want to remain the go-to solution because Bitcoin has some of that figured out.
The only way you could maintain like a fully regulated system is just have a purely. The only way you could maintain a fully regulated system like Stripe is to have a purely whitelisted system. So you could only interact and make payments to wallets that have already been whitelisted or nodes that have already been whitelisted. That's the only way that like we could move to that. But I think it is possible that you end up with like two parallel economies where you have one that does that and then another one that doesn't. So I think like you have entities like Lightspark. Not going to throw too much shade their way because they're not here, but I think they will probably go in that kind of regulated direction because they're like going to be working with enterprises like Coinbase and stuff like that.
But the point is that we have the choice, right? With Bitcoin, we have the choice.
And like the reason the current fiat system is really expensive is because of all the compliance costs. So this non-Stripe like non-KYC economy is going to be a lot cheaper to interact with because you don't have all of those compliance costs stacked on top.
And because of the intermediaries also, it's quite costly.
Yeah, exactly. There's everybody, rent seekers taking their cut.
Yeah, I think if Bitcoin loses that property, it's not Bitcoin anymore. You're just using the fiat system, right? So we are all building on Bitcoin. And we chose to build on Bitcoin, not on PayPal or Stripe or any of these centralized money service providers. So we have to do what we can to make sure that this stays possible, and building in open source, I think, makes that possible. No one, as long as everyone runs open source, it should be fine, I think.
I don't really have anything to add.
Yeah, I think for Bitcoin, the stance is different because with a legacy financial system, you have to start with everything being in control under KYC and the surveillance, right? But with Bitcoin, it doesn't even realize or recognize the term borders. But there are services that would cater to, being more compliant to some government. I see that as like, having Bitcoin as maybe say a honey badger trying to befriend a snake just because it wants to, but it also knows that it can kill that snake anytime. Yeah. To put it in analogy term.
And just to make sure like we don't also like antagonize Bitcoin companies out there who actually are in this jurisdiction that actually might have to do like KYC as well. I want to introduce like an analogy about like not gonna talk too much about the dark web, but like if you guys know about the Tor network, then you also know that like basically the Tor network is actually a parallel network where you actually have announced entry points that actually have to remain public as well. And like as long as they actually like maintain the protocol, the Tor protocol, the same way that like when you have a KYC Lightning account, if they maintain the Lightning interoperability with like basically other wallets that actually can be user wallets or unannounced wallet as well, to me like I'll be happy with that KYC company. Like just to make sure that like like we don't antagonize the Tor entry points and we don't antagonize too much. I'm sure they collect data, but like too much with the KYC Lightning companies as well.
All right, I think that's it for the questions. Right? Right, cool. So thank you for this interesting discussion. I think I understand about half of it. I'm actually quite unqualified for this panel, but yeah, I try to do my best. So thank you, everyone. And this is the last panel. I don't know. Let's see you all again next year. And we still have some more panels on the main stage. So if you want to join us all on there, it's a Thai language panel. The translation AI system that I built for Thai for English, it's totally ruined and it doesn't work. So I'm sorry about that. We'll do the retranslation again. He's the one who made it. But the English to Thai works perfectly today. So thanks to you.
I say it adds a new flavor because like when I look at the subtitles and when I look at like what's going on, I'm just like, this is like
what is this?
BitTorrent level of like subtitles. We're kidding.
It's an experiment that we want to try, right? So thank you everyone for being here. Hope to see you all again next time we have a conference, and we'll be seeing all you around many times. Yeah.